welcome to our online worship service. We greet you in the fellowship and spirit of the light, and may the peace of the divine be with you. My name is Alex Bradley, and I'm a Unitarian minister living and working in Cheshire. Our opening words come from two sources. Firstly, from the Gospel of Luke in the Bible. Jesus said, "Every tree is known by its fruit. The good man or woman, out of the good treasure of his or her heart, produces good." And from Shakespeare's Hamlet. This above all, to thine own self be true, and it must follow as the night the day. Thou canst not then be false to any man. And I light this candle with words of a Unitarian avowal of faith from the Hungarian Unitarian Church. I am Unitarian. I live and work in this faith. Jesus is my guide and God is my help. We humans are all brothers and sisters. Our law is one, love. The goal of our work is shared. Happy are those of God's kingdom. And a prayer. Loving God, we give thanks as we gather together in this online assembly of harmony and love. Teach us to be joyful always, to pray continually, to give thanks and know acceptance in all our circumstances. Help us to look upon the faces of men and women that we live among and feel blessed by their companionship. We think especially of those who are isolated and cut off from the companionship of loved ones and friends, either by the coronavirus regulations or by force of circumstance. For those in hospice or hospital or isolated at home, we send our loving thoughts and prayers. May they find strength to cope in their aloneness and isolation. And may we be enhanced by remembering the teachings and ministry of Jesus. And may we also remember all those in our own lifetimes who have offered words and deeds that have been a guide for us through life's winding path. For all these things, God of love, we give our thanks. Amen. Our first reading is the famous story of the rescue of Moses from the book of Exodus in the Old Testament. A man of the tribe of Levi married a Levite woman, and she became pregnant and gave birth to a son. When she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him for 3 months. But when she could hide him no longer, she got a papyrus basket for him and coated it with tar and pitch. Then she placed the child in it and put it among the reeds along the banks of the Nile. His sister stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. Then Pharaoh's daughter went down to Nile to bathe, and her attendants were walking along the riverbank. She saw the basket among the reeds and sent her servant to get it. She opened it and saw the baby. He was crying, and she felt sorry for him. "This is one of the Hebrew babies," she said. Then his sister asked Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and get one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you?" "Yes, go," she answered. So the girl went and got the baby's mother. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this baby and nurse him for me, and I will pay you." So the woman took the baby and nursed him. When the child grew older, she took him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses, saying, "I have drawn him out of the water." And next, some words from a hymn in one of our hymn books, Hymns for Living, adapted from words of a hymn by Horatius Bonar. You must be true unto yourself, if truth to others you would teach. Your soul must overflow with love, if you another's soul would reach. Think wisely, truly, and your thoughts this hungry world shall help to feed. Speak truly, and your every word shall yet become a fruitful seed. Let lips be full of gentle speech, your heart respond to human need. Live truly, and your life shall be a glorious and a noble creed. And a short reading from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 8. Jesus went on with his disciples to the villages of Caesarea Philippi, and on the way he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that I am?" And they told him, "John the Baptist, and others say Elijah, and others one of the prophets." And he asked them, "But who do you say that I am?" Peter answered him, "You are the Christ." And he charged them to tell no one about him. Who am I? It's a question of identity. It seems a question with an obvious answer, at least at the conventional level of reality. We begin with the names we have usually given to us at birth. In ancient times, a name was meant to reflect something of the character of the person. The name John, with all its variations, meant God is gracious. Hilary meant cheerful. And Peter, a rock. Some people, mostly women, but sometimes men, change their surnames when marrying or combine their surnames. Occasionally, though, people call themselves by a completely different name to the name they were originally given. I once conducted a wedding for a man whose legal birth name was one thing, but who was known to all by a completely different name. And I had to remind myself to call him by his legal names during the legal declarations of the ceremony. Ironically, some scholars think that Moses may at least be partly Egyptian in origin, rather than referring to Moses being drawn out of the water. It's perhaps symbolic that there is this ambiguity about his name right at the beginning of his story. There are many stories told about Moses, who was to become the great lawgiver of his people. He is saved from death as a baby in a story that is handed down to us. We're told that he is brought up in the royal court, but he does not forget or repudiate his people. As a young adult, he intervenes when he sees an Egyptian mistreating one of his people, and in the fray accidentally kills him, and he has to flee for his life. And then we read later on that he protects the daughters of a priest called Jethro in the land of Midian, and goes back to eat with the family and marries one of Jethro's daughters. And then from being a shepherd, he is called by God. We have the famous story of the burning bush. But we also have a picture of a man who is someone who struggles with this call. He says at one point to God in the story, "I am slow of speech and tongue. Send, I pray, some other person." He really doesn't want to go forward here. He has to struggle to become the person he finally became and who he truly was. And in the reading from the New Testament, from the Gospel of Mark, Jesus, whose name means, depending on how it is interpreted and translated, God is my help or deliverer or my salvation, asks his disciples, "Who do the people say I am?" And they come up with various answers. But then he challenges them to say, who do you think I am? And the answer comes from Peter, "You are the anointed one," meaning the Christ. This is not a surname, but a description of what Peter sees as Jesus' essential being. And Jesus is quite clear that this is not to be used for earthly gain or profit, because he tells them to tell no one about what has just been said. And we know from elsewhere in the New Testament that some of the disciples did hope for earthly status and power. James and John, the sons of Zebedee, ask him where their position might be in the coming kingdom. "Can we sit on your right and left hand?" they ask him. And Jesus reminds them that his purpose and their purpose is to serve, not to be served. The question, who am I? What is my true identity? Is an existential question about our ultimate significance in this world. Yes, a good name is important, but it is not enough in itself. Many people, whether consciously or not, identify themselves with their work. But they then find that either redundancy or retirement robs them of their sense of purpose and meaning in life. It is a wonderful thing to be a good husband or wife or partner, or to be a loving parent. But what happens if you lose your spouse or partner, or you face a situation of the empty nest syndrome when your children leave home? The story, the legend of Moses, has many levels of meaning, but it reminds us that our accident of birth, who our parents are, or what our nationality is, or our social status, is not enough to define who we truly are. We must become the people we are, so to speak. Every word, spoken or unspoken, every action we take or do not take, every thought that we entertain in our minds, all these go to make up who we are. We are the tree, and our thoughts, words, and actions are the fruits. They become our identity, our true self. We have the divine gifts of teaching, guidance, and strength. But it is for us to put these gifts to use, to literally make ourselves and live our lives in accordance with this holy wisdom. May we find our true selves in union with the God who is love, truth, compassion, and peace. Amen. And some words to close our worship. God of love, be with us as we resume our everyday lives. Bless those of us who have shared our online worship. Bless those who have not been with us today. Bless those we love and those we should love. Bless those who need our love and those whom we need to love. And may we be a blessing to our world. Amen.